Ms. Falk, are we okay to proceed? Thank you. Okay. Thank you, committee members. So with this, I'll call the meeting to order. The clerk has advised me that those appearing virtually have been sound tested and is okay to proceed with translation. Welcome to meeting number 65 at the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting, as I referenced, is taking place in a hybrid format. Committee members are appearing in the room, and virtually all witnesses are in the room with us. I would remind those appearing that you have the option of choosing to speak in the official language of your choice. Virtually, you have the translation icon at the bottom of your surface here in the room. You have translation through the earpiece at your mic. If there's an issue with translation, please get my attention. We'll suspend while it is being corrected. I would also like to remind members screenshots are not allowed of today's meeting or in-person shots in the room while the meeting while the meeting is proceeding. I would also like to remind those, please, if you could slowly give your comments, it would be great for the translators to deal with. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Friday, February the 3rd, 2023, the committee will continue its study of Bill C-35, an act respecting early learning and childcare in Canada. Today we are resuming the clause-by-clause consideration. I would like to provide members of the committee with some instructions and a few comments on how the committee will proceed with the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-35.
I think we've already
Through?
We've already covered that.
Yeah, this is moved through to us. Members of the committee, I don't see anybody new, so we've gone through that particular material. I will go through clause by clause. Those members that have provided an amendment would proceed to move that amendment when we get to that particular section. Again, I would like to welcome from the department Michelle Latimore, Director General, Sherry Redden, Director General, Jill Henry, Director of Policy, Kelly Nallaris, Director, and Christian Paraday, Director of the department. So we will begin. As you are aware, at the last meeting we had concluded and carried up to Clause 8. So we will begin with Clause 9. Is there an amendment to Clause 9? That's fine. Take your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I complete my breakfast here, thank you so much. So this Clause 9, we're looking at suggesting the following amendment, or adding the following amendment, that the members... So this would be adding after line 4 on page 6 for reference. The members of the council must be representative of all parts of the early learning and childcare system, including private and home-based childcare providers and public and not-for-profit childcare providers. So again, this is kind of going back to what we are pushing for after listening to the witnesses, stakeholders, and everyone around childcare in Canada. The council is, a great piece of having people give feedback and chiming in, but right now, the way that it stands, the council is not fairly represented of all childcare sectors. So what we're asking with this amendment is that it's representative of all parts of the early learning and childcare system, so including those other representatives whose voices are not currently on the council.
Discussion? Ms. Sachs?
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank all the members for joining us today and officials who are here to help us navigate this process. I can't say I'm supportive of this amendment just for the simple reason that the approach of the council to date has been very clear in terms of selection for the council, participation. We've heard overwhelmingly from witnesses and from experts in the field in terms of an evidence-based approach, and also this stewardship of public funds to a not-for-profit and public sector approach, which is what we're looking for. But I'd also comment to colleagues that it's a little bit redundant, as in Section 11, as it's drafted, the appointments request for representation of diversity, and diversity is a principle and approach to the council. But again, we want to ensure that the council is representative of the national system that is aimed to be built, which is well-rooted in, the approach is well-rooted and clear.
Thank you, Ms. Sachs. Ms. Ferrari, then Mr. Godin.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I think that's kind of contradictory to what we did hear from witnesses, because if it is diversity, then why wouldn't you put diversity on the council? I mean, we have, and I'm not sure if the clerk can chime in, but how many witnesses put forth that they want to see this representation on the council? I understand that the bill is said not-for-profit and public, but if you don't have those voices at the table, you're not really getting a whole picture for childcare in the country, because there are so many different forms of it. So I think that this is just fair representation of all of the different sectors of childcare in the country. So I definitely don't agree with my colleague that just because it says diversity, right now what we know is that there isn't diversity on that council. So you're saying one thing and doing another thing. There's a whole bunch of quotes, Mr. Speaker, I'll just give you a couple. The current iteration of the CWELC does not recognize the key role female entrepreneurs have played in the creation and development of Canada's early learning and childcare sector. That's from the briefing note from the Association of Daycare Operators of Ontario. Another one, the current language directs funding in particular to public and not-for-profit providers, and it's much weaker than it should be. That's from March 31st testimony from Dr. Susan Prentice, Duff Roblin Professor of Government, University of Manitoba. And here's another one, championing home childcare as a part of CWELC would increase access to a diverse array of childcare options. So that's April 18th testimony, Julie Bisnath, Program Coordinator, Childcare Providers Resource Network. So we're hearing that they want to have diversity, the Liberals want to have diversity on this bill, but then when you put forth an amendment to increase diversity, they're saying no. So it's just a little confusing to me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. Monsieur Godin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Good morning, everyone. I listened to my colleague from the government party who said that this was already included in Clause 11. Now, Mr. Chairperson, I'm going to utter something I say often, and those who see me in other committee members know this. Let's be careful in our approach. Let's not do too much. Let's allow all stakeholders to participate. I think we'll be more robust, stronger if we are more inclusive when it comes to all stakeholders in this area. So in my opinion, it's important to support this amendment. I don't understand the government's reluctance on this note. Of course, we're wary as to the choice of members of various committees, and I think it is important to define things, but this is important all the same.
Ms. Sachs?
I'll keep my comments short. What I will say is that there is nothing stopping the council from engaging with stakeholders from every aspect across the country in terms of getting information just like we do in committees or any other framework that enables us to have deep consultations with what is happening across the country. And in terms of diversity, we do want a reflection in the consultations that happen at the council to be reflective of Canadian society as a whole. But, as a council, it's also the mandate of its work is clear and is true to the agreements that have been established and also the Secretariat. And we don't want to see creep happening as we saw in Australia and other places when when there are consultation is extremely valuable and witnesses are important, but we also want to make sure that the mandate of the council is clear.
Monsieur Gaudin.
En fait, Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, yes, I agree with my colleague that consultations are important, but why limit ourselves and not have these folks around the table? I think the council would be even stronger. This doesn't make sense. A consultative process is important, but those reports end up being shelved oftentimes. And ultimately, the buck stops with the council when it comes to the authority to make recommendations. But ultimately, I think we should have the most stakeholders possible around the table in order to best attain the objectives set out.
Madame Ferrari, you had your hand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listen, I think you can't have equity and equality if you're not sitting at the table. Like, as a woman in politics, I would assume my colleague knows this very well. If you have all men sitting at the table, but they go and consult with a woman, does that count? No. You have to have that person at the table to include them in the conversation. And so I think this is extremely unfair to cut out some of the most important people who are included in the bill, quite frankly, and they're just not having their voice at the table. It just doesn't make any sense.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Clerk, I will call for a recorded vote on the amendment to Clause 9 of Madame Ferrari.
Ms. Sachs?
No.
Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Coteau?
No.
Mr. Van Bynen?
No.
Mr. Long?
no.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Monsieur Gaudin?
Oui.
Madame Bérubé?
Oui.
Ms. Gazan?
No.
Yes pour 5, nays contre 6.
The amendment is defeated. I'll now call for a vote on Clause 9. Shall Clause 9 carry? Recorded vote.
Yeah. Ms. Sachs?
Oui.
Mr. Collins? Yes. Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mr. Long? Yes. Ms. Gray?
No.
Ms. Falk?
No.
Ms. Ferrari?
No.
Monsieur Gaudin?
No.
Madame Bérubé?
Oui.
Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 7, nays contre 4.
Clause 9 carried without amendment. Shall Clause 10 carry? No, no amendments have been referred. I see consensus. Mr. Clerk, Clause 10 is carried. Clause 11. Yeah. Do we have a
Merci, Monsieur le
Monsieur
Président.
Gaudin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Well, this is a good segue from what we just discussed, and I think it's important that we can add the warning under CPC 7, and I'll read it out loud, that Bill C-35 in Clause 11 be amended by replacing line 14 on page 6 with the following, quote, representative of the diversity of Canadian society, in particular Indigenous peoples and official language minority communities. Mr. Chairperson, this is supposed to be a National Advisory Council on Early Learning and Childcare, so I think that it's important that there is appropriate level of representation. We'd like it to be even better, but as far as this amendment is concerned, we'll be protecting Indigenous persons and also official language minority communities. At the very least, that is how the basis upon which committee members should be selected. We would have liked to have gone further, but the government didn't want that, unfortunately. But at least this core function will be protected: official languages, communities, and Indigenous peoples.
Ms. Sachs, Madame Sachs.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to my colleague, Mr. Godin.
Common ground, if I can make a small sub-amendment to the proposal put forward by Monsieur Godin in changing the words "in particular" to "including." And I'll explain the rationale behind that is that we always have to be cognizant that we want to make sure that everyone's at the table, but also recognize that there is a parallel FPT table going on with Indigenous leadership, and we always want to be mindful, and I've mentioned this before in other aspects of the legislation we've discussed, to ensure that our tracks of dialogue, all of them, not only in terms of this process and what we're building, but in all of our relationships with Indigenous communities, that we are respectful of the multiple tracks of discussions that are happening. So in that case, if I can just move the sub-amendment of changing "in particular" to propose "including," that would be my suggestion.
The clerk has the sub-amendment. Do you want to circulate it? It is a one-word amendment, sub-amendment. But it's circulated. You should have it on your email. Yes. The sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. So we're now on the sub-amendment. Ms. Gazan, on the sub-amendment.
So for different reasons than Madame Sachs, I think it's good that Indigenous people and official language minorities are mentioned. I think that's very positive. I do agree with "including," however, just because, like, for example, children with disabilities, they're a very specific group with very specific educational needs. I just worry that it would exclude really groups with specific needs in education. So I do support the amendment of including the sub-amendment. I do like the what's been offered up by the Conservative Party in terms of a suggestion with the change of "including" for different reasons, however.
Thank you. Any discussion on the sub-amendment? We're currently on the sub-amendment. Ms. Gray, and then Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we recess for just a minute?
Certainly, we'll suspend for two
Suspend the
moments
meeting.
while the members review the matters before the committee. And we were on discussion of the sub-amendment to the amendment on Clause 11. Any further discussion? Madame Ferrari, on the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, because I think there is some language just into my colleague to my left here. When we say in particular, for us it was prioritizing. Including is a good word too. It's just ensuring that one feels like it's prioritizing, one feels more generic. So I just wanted to ensure, but I think we're on the same page. I just wanted to, from a language perspective, ensure that. And my colleague Ms. Gazan's comments were well taken too. Just for clarification for the record.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. Monsieur Gaudin.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, to be transparent, I'd say this. I appreciate my colleague's openness. I would have liked to have been just as open with the previous amendment, but she wasn't receptive to that. But I just want to make sure that what we're dealing with here is not the amendment of Clause 11, page 6, by only this wording. I need to repeat this, that in the sub-amendment, the entire amendment that I've presented would be amended with the words that my colleague is proposing, i.e. in particular. Because if we just have this in the legislation, it will weaken things. We need to talk about Indigenous persons. We need to talk... so perhaps the clerk can shed light on this. Thank you. Yes, this would be CPC 7. That would be in the new version of the bill, except the word include, in particular, would be replaced by the word including.
Merci.
Thank you.
No further discussion. I will call the clerk to have a recorded vote on the sub-amendment of Madame Sachs.
Madame Sachs?
Oui.
Mr. Collins? Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Monsieur Gaudin?
Oui.
Madame Bérubé?
Oui.
And Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 11, nays contre nil. 0.
The sub-amendment of Madame Sachs is carried. We will now vote on the amendment as amended of Mr. Gaudin. Recorded vote, Mr. Clerk.
Madame Sachs?
En faveur?
Mr. Collins? Yes. Mr. Coteau?
In favor?
Mr. Van Bynen?
Oui.
Mr. Long?
In favor?
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Monsieur Gaudin?
Oui.
Madame Bérubé?
Oui.
And Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 11, nays contre 0, nil.
Shall Clause 11 carry as amended? I see a consensus. Clause 11 is carried as amended. Shall Clause 12 carry? Carried. Shall Clause 13 carry? Carried. Clause 14. Madame Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, requesting the amendments as follows. So I have a few here. So, by replacing lines 21 and 22 on page 7 with the following: programs and services, funding, and activities that support early learning and childcare, as well as strategies to support recruitment and retention of a well-qualified workforce. B, by replacing line 23 on page 7 with the following: regularly conduct engagement activities on matters relating. and by replacing line 25 on page 7 with the following, including the availability of childcare services, the number of families on wait lists for childcare places, and any progress made in reducing the number of families on wait lists. D, by adding after line 28 on page 7 the following, prepare and make public an annual progress report. And you can just see again, Mr. Chair, just trying to strengthen this bill for a variety of different reasons. Obviously, the workforce has been a massive issue from witnesses and testimony we've heard. The wait lists continue to increase. As we had one witness testify, they had 3,000 spaces and 12,000 people were on the wait list. Many centers are closing down because they just can't recruit the staff. So with these amendments, we're hoping that we can strengthen that, as well as the progress report, because if there's no measurement for success, if there's no accountability, it's very hard to be successful or to change or adapt or pivot to ensure that what we're doing is in fact working. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. Before we open for a debate, the committee should be aware there's a line conflict between the amendment moved by Ms. Ferrari and NDP 3 amendment on the same. So if CPC, if the Ms. Ferrari's amendment is adopted, it removes the NDP amendment. So Ms. Sachs on the amendment of Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I always appreciate the desire we all have here to ensure that we have a really good system and good legislation to ensure the system that we've built through these agreements with every province and territory have sustainability and longevity to impact families in the years to come, which is why I can't be supportive of these amendments, because it goes really beyond the advisory role of the council. The role of the council is to be really one that collects information and advice to guide the process, but the jurisdictional responsibilities that my colleague Ms. Ferrari is talking about in terms of employment workforce and also in the monitoring and reporting on wait lists is part of the provincial agreements. It is their responsibility to bring that information up. The role of this council is not an oversight or supervisory body. And we really need to be mindful of we're entering a unique space in education with provinces and territories, and we have to be respectful of those jurisdictional boundaries. And the role of the National Advisory Council is exactly that. It is advising. It is not a monitoring body. It is not a supervisory body. It is not one. Frankly, it's in terms of the jurisdictional responsibilities. Again, with Indigenous communities and other communities that are part of this process that we're in, to impose a supervisory role to a council that's simply not in its mandate. I can't support these types of amendments. Thank you.
Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, it's a little bit frustrating. I don't understand what the role of the National Council is if they're not going to implement strategy suggestions on the biggest problems we see facing childcare. Also, how are you going to monitor the data if you're not making thoughtful recommendations in the strategies around the workforce? There's been words here exchanged saying we care about ECEs, but then you're not approving this amendment to support recruitment and retention of a well-qualified workforce. So I'm just not sure what the role of the National Council is if there's no data reporting and then there's no thoughtful recommendations. Again, it isn't adding up of what the role is.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote on the amendment of Ms. Ferrari. Record a vote, clerk.
Madame Sachs,
Contre.
Mr. Collins, Mr. Coteau,
Opposed?
Mr. Van Bynen,
No.
Mr. Long, no. Ms. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Falk,
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari,
Yes.
Monsieur Godin,
Oui.
Madame Bérubé,
Contre.
and Ms. Gazan.
Contre.
Yeas pour 4, nays compte 7.
Amendment of Madame Ferrari was defeated. That will allow the amendment of Madame Gazan. Ms. Gazan?
Thank you, Chair. So the NDP amendment, we're proposing that Bill C-35 and Clause 14 be amended by replacing line 23 on page 7 with the following: consult broadly with individuals and organizations that have an interest in early learning and childcare, including parents, the early childhood education workforce, childcare providers, advocates, and policy and research specialists on matters relating. So that's what we're proposing for amendment. And it's not that I didn't like some of the amendments that were proposed by the Conservative Party, but I felt like it might be a little bit over prescriptive, you know, in terms of allowing the council to kind of make those kinds of decisions as specialists in the field. I thought it would give more autonomy, this amendment, to like the group that I had mentioned. And our amendment also supports having a report included in the minister's report, so it puts more responsibility on the minister. So I think we're going in a similar direction, but I think it's stronger. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Seeing no discussion, Ms. Ferrari, on the amendment of Ms. Gazan.
Just to be on the record for this, I think it is prescriptive based on the issues that were put forward at consultation. And I think that's what our job is here, is to listen to the people that have come forward and shared their concerns. So I think it's a little frustrating, because I just feel like the way that this legislation is written is that the government, the Liberals, the NDP are deciding what's best for everybody, rather than listening to everyone who's come to the table and all of the people who've been left out. So I just want that on the record. It just feels a little, it feels like we're not listening to people.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I will call a recorded vote on the amendment of Ms. Gazan.
Madame Sachs.
En faveur.
Mr. Collins. Mr. Coteau.
In favor.
Mr. Van Bynen.
In favor.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Ms. Gray.
Yes.
Ms. Falk.
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari.
Yes.
Monsieur Godin.
Oui.
Madame Bérubé.
Contre.
Ms. Gazan.
Yes.
Yeas pour 10, nays contre 1.
The amendment of Ms. Gazan is carried. We will now vote on Clause 14 as amended. Recorded vote, clerk.
Madame
Clause
Sachs.
14 as amended.
Madame Sachs.
Oui.
Mr. Collins. Yes. Mr. Coteau.
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Ms. Gray. Ms. Fall.
Abstain.
Ms. Ferrari.
Abstain.
Monsieur Godin.
Abstention.
Madame Bérubé.
Pour.
And Ms. Gazan.
Yes.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 0, nil, abstentions 4.
Clause 14 was carried as amended. We now have a new clause 14.1.
So what the NDP is proposing is that the bill C-35 be amended by adding, after line 28 on page 7, the following new clause: 14.1, the minister must, on request of the council, provide the council with any information related to a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system, and that the minister's possession, or that is in the minister's possession, and that the minister is authorized to share.
Discussion?
Uh, Just to speak on this, this was something that, came directly from advocates in the field in terms of accountability mechanisms for the minister. And so this amendment is merely echoing voices from leading advocates in the field.
Ms. Sachs?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleague. And I agree with her, we do want to listen to experts in the field and the evidence that guides us towards a better system for kids across this country. Chair, I have a small sub-amendment to what Ms. Gazan is proposing that I'd like to read. That the minister may, on request of the council, provide the council with any information respecting the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system that is related to the council's functions and that is in the minister's possession, if it is within the minister's authority to share the information. So, as always, we want to make sure that there is a collaborative effort and approach to this, and we want to be supportive rather than prescriptive, understanding jurisdiction and the roles that each level of government plays in creating this system.
Thank you, Ms. Sachs. Just make sure that the committee members have the sub-amendment. No. I have the amendment because this is a new clause that was moved by Ms. Gazan. So we have a amendment currently moved by Ms. Sachs. Circulated to all the members. Then I'll go to you, Ms. Gazan. Oh, sorry. The legislative clerk has received the sub-amendment. It is in order, and we'll move to discussion on it as soon as the clerk circulates it to all committee members. Okay, the clerk has advised that the amendment of Ms. Sachs on the new clause 14.1 as moved by Ms. Gazan, you should have it all. So we will move to debate on the amendment of Ms. Sachs. Ms. Gazan, did you have your hand up on that one? Yes. Okay, you have the floor.
I just want to say that, the minister must to the minister may is a major amendment. I accept that this is probably as far as we're going to be able to take it. But I'll accept that amendment in the spirit of trying to move this forward. But I just want to have on record that there is a massive difference between saying that the minister must and the minister may.
Thank you, Ms. Gazan. Ms. Ferrari, and then Ms. Gray.
Listen, this gets more and more frustrating, to be honest with you, because it's like in the last amendment, we're gonna be too prescriptive, and now we're doing this. So it's like we listen when it's convenient for whatever it is we want to achieve, and it's a major issue. What my colleague has just said, but in the spirit of moving it along, that's so frustrating, because it's like, so now it's up to maybe the minister will, maybe the minister won't. Like, the biggest problem we have right now with this government is there's no accountability. There's no consequences for anything. So if we're caring for children, and if the nucleus of this conversation is children, but she can or can't, depending on how she feels, or maybe not, it's ridiculous. And I think I think this is majorly watering down. So I am frustrated with my colleague to say in the spirit of moving it forward, when you've just said it's a major difference, and now you're passing the buck on accountability in the name of child welfare. I think none of this makes any sense.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari, Ms. Gray, and then Monsieur Godin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one-word change completely changes the context of this. The whole purpose of it, the NDP might as well just withdraw it, because, I mean, ministers may do anything at any time. Like, there's really no purpose to this. It completely removes the transparency, completely removes the accountability that I think was part of the purpose of this. The purpose of this amendment, which made sense. So to even suggest this, I mean, it's completely removing any anything that the government would be mandated to do. You might as well not even bother having it. It's very frustrating that this would even be considered. It's absolutely unbelievable. Thank you,
Monsieur Godin.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, my colleague also pointed this out. The whole purpose of the New Democratic Amendment is to set out a number of obligations. Now, we need to understand that in the legislation, nothing at any point prevents the sharing of information between minister and committee. Nothing. So there was an amendment that was suggested by the NDP to obligate the minister to provide, not that he can or may, but that he must or shall. So this changes the meaning behind the amendment, and the New Democrats are going to support this. Is this because they're in bed with the Liberals? I think that they are. We've had the same experience at the Official Languages Committee. The Liberals decided to fast-track the process, but they didn't present the amendments in committee. At the tabling of the report in the House of Commons, they did so. So we wasted our time once again at the House of Commons. We're still not at third reading, and we had to vote on the report because the Liberals did exactly the same thing at that time. They moved a motion to add the word may. We used the word must or will, and they used the word may or can. And they're serving us up a dose of the same medicine today. This is an aberration. The New Democrats have moved an amendment. The Liberals are moving a sub-amendment to weaken the NDP amendment, and the New Democrats turn around and support it. But the New Democrats' intention initially was to obligate the minister. And as my colleague just said, unfortunately in this legislation currently written by the Liberals, there is no obligation for accountability. And I'm just passing through here, but I'm just as frustrated as my colleague.
Monsieur Godin.
Thank you, Mr. Godin.
Well, since Monsieur Godin is talking about who I'm sleeping with, talking about being in the bed with the Liberals, but, I think we should watch that language. But in any case, I'm going to be honest, I'm not happy with this amendment. And, but, in the spirit of moving this forward and not losing certainly the recommendations coming from the field, it's very clear that this is the last straw on this particular amendment. I will support the sub-amendment with the recognition that is a significant change. And I do agree with my colleagues to the right, no pun intended. But I think this is as far as it's going to go. But just wanted to have that on record.
Thank you. Ms. Falk has her hand up, but Ms. Gray has asked for a momentary suspension, so I'm going to suspend for a couple of moments at the request of Ms. Gray. We'll suspend for 2 minutes. amendment of Ms. Sachs. But I did have the first hand I had up when we suspended was Ms. Falk, which is now down. Ms. Falk, did you want the floor, or Ms. Ferrari has her hand up here in the room? Ms. Falk, you had your hand up when we suspended. Are you okay? She's not hearing me. Ms. Falk, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, Ms. Falk, you had your hand up when we suspended, but I see it's down now, and Ms. Ferrari has indicated she wants the floor. So are you, is your hand down?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Then my hand's down. Yes.
Okay. Ms. Ferrari on the amendment of Ms. Sachs.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Listen, I think I've said a lot of what I wanted to say, which is the accountability and transparency piece of this, right? So at the end of the day, if the people who are in charge of children have nobody to answer to, that's a major issue to the welfare of the child. That's what this comes down to. To my colleague down the way, who I respect greatly, and we work really well together, it's really upsetting. If you say you want to move this spirit forward, or this forward, then don't do this with them, because your amendment is better. This amendment, this sub-amendment, is going to water down accountability and transparency. Mr. Chair, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair.
We have a point of order.
Yeah, comments should be through you.
Thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you,
Madame
Mr.
Ferrari.
Long, for reminding me. What agreement is in place? And so it's just infuriating that you're saying you want to move this along. Well, let's move it along, because if you vote no to their sub-amendment, then we can keep your amendment, which we agree with, and we can move forward and keep this bill moving forward. There's no accountability, there's no transparency, and at the end of the day, guess who suffers as a result of that, Mr. Chair? The child. If we want to help our future, that's what we're here for. Children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. Ms. Falk, and then Madame Gazan, and then Monsieur Gaudin.
Rappel au règlement, monsieur.
On a point of order, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my New Democratic colleague accused me of speaking about her personal activities. I'd like us to listen to the original version of the transcription so that she understands that that's not exactly what I said. Her leader said that he was very proud of the New Democrat Liberal coalition. I spoke about the coalition, and I'd like that my colleague withdraw her remarks, please.
Thank you, Monsieur Gaudin. You do have a point of order. Madame Gazan, do you want to comment?
So I'll withdraw that comment. I was making a side joke just because we were talking about being in bed with the Liberals and things like that. So, I'm sorry if it offended, but I was making a cheeky response in response to being accused of being in bed with the Liberals.
Thank you, Madame Gazan. I just remind members that disrespectful language towards another member is not allowed. It's out of order. So we'll go back. Thank you, Monsieur Gaudin and Madame Gazan. We'll go to Ms. Falk. Ms. Falk.
Thank you very much, Chair. In discussion of the sub-amendment, through you, Chair, the NDP's original amendment is better. It is better. And I sure hope that the NDP does not settle for less in this case. I just want to put on the record, it's frustrating for me because I'm hearing a lot, and we've heard this a lot actually throughout this study since this has been in this committee, about moving things along, working in collaboration, getting things done, but at what cost is my question through you, Chair, to the NDP. This NDP amendment is stronger than the Liberal sub-amendment, and through you, Chair, I would ask that our NDP colleague sitting at the table does not settle for what the the Liberals are are wanting her to settle for. As my colleague, Ms. Frary said, this language matters. The original amendment is very much stronger than may. It holds the accountability and helps with transparency. And at the end of the day, it's the kids. This legislation is supposed to be for the children, which is the next generation and the next generation to come into this country. So I'm just, through you, Chair, letting our NDP colleague know that her amendment is much better than this sub-amendment that's being offered by the Liberals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Falk. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a recorded vote on.
I wanted to
Ms. Gazan?
Yeah.
You have the floor.
So, I appreciate all the feedback. The reality is it is the NDP that put this whole amendment forward in the beginning to have any sort of accountability and transparency in the bill. We have been very clear that we're getting direction from people in the field in terms of what is satisfactory to them, people that are working in the field and advocating in the field. My fear to my Conservative colleagues through you, Chair, is that, with under, support with members from the field, that should we not accept this amendment, that this there'll be nothing. And I don't like it, but I will be supporting the Liberal amendment.
Ms. Ferrari on the amendment.
I'm just having a hard time understanding the math there to my colleague. Because if you vote no to their sub-amendment, your amendment, we've all told you we'll vote for it. So that makes no sense. So you're
Point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I know. Through you, Chair.
Comments to the Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Van Bynen. That argument makes no sense. So you have the numbers on this side. There's 11 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it makes no sense.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. And I'll remind members again, director comments through the chair. Recorded vote on the amendment of Ms. Sachs. Mr. Clerk.
Madam Sachs?
Oui.
Mr. Collins? Yes. Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Monsieur Long? Yes. Ms. Gray?
No.
Ms. Falk?
No.
Ms. Ferrari?
No.
Monsieur Godin?
Non.
Madame Bérubé?
Contre.
Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 6-6, nays contre 5-5.
The amendment of Ms. Sachs is carried. We'll now I'll call a vote on. Do you have your hand up, Ms. Sachs? You have the floor.
I am on. Okay, thank you, Chair. I've heard everyone around the table, and we have a goal here to put in place legislation that will support the agreements that have already been put in place. And we want to make sure that we have a process and a system that incorporates stakeholders and incorporates an open conversation with the federal government and the minister and the National Advisory Council to ensure that we're getting the best information while the provinces and territories also meet their obligations under their agreements in terms of accountability, transparency, and implementation. And in the spirit of that, of strengthening the relationship to ensure that our system is one that is accountable and listening to those in the field, I'd like to propose the following sub-amendment to 14.1, that the minister may, on request of the council, provide the council with any information respecting the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system that is related to the council's functions and that is in the minister's possession if it is within the minister's authority to share information. Oh, wait, I'm being asked to suspend.
We'll suspend for a moment. Committee will suspend for 2 minutes.
I withdraw.
To voting on
Yes, I called for the floor, Mr. Chair.
clause 14.1 as amended.
By Ms.
Oui, Monsieur Gaudin and then Ms. Gray.
Well, Mr. Chair, I have a question to ask of my New Democratic Party colleague. What was her intention when she moved her amendment? And how come she changed her mind and voted in favour of the Liberals' sub-amendment, which weakens her own amendment?
Mr. Gaudin, Ms. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now that we have a newly revised amendment here, it completely changes what was before us previously, what was sent in previously, which was a good and strong amendment dealing with accountability and transparency. This newly amended amendment it's really doesn't say anything, because saying that the minister may do something, the minister, may get someone a coffee. I mean, it's really what's in here. There's absolutely no accountability that the minister has to do anything. The minister may, if the minister wants to. I mean, it's a completely redundant clause now. There's no purpose to it. You could list
Chair,
anything
point of
after
order.
this, Mr. Chair.
Chair, thank you. Through you, with the greatest respect, we've already voted on this. Did we?
We have not adopted clause 14.1.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yep, Ms. Gray has the floor and is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know it's sometimes a little challenging to follow along with all of these sub-amendments being dropped at the last minute without prior notice. But yes.
The clause currently on the floor.
So I think it's just this has just changed dramatically. It completely changes the context of it, and there's really no purpose to it anymore. There's no accountability, no transparency, no requirement that the minister has to do anything. So it's completely changed the whole context of it.
Seeing no further debate, Mr. Clerk will call a vote on new clause 14.1 as amended. NDP 4. Yes, NDP 4 as amended.
Madame Sachs,
Yes, NDP 4 is amended.
En faveur?
Mr. Collins, Mr. Coteau,
In favor.
Mr. Van Bynen,
In favor.
Mr. Long,
Yes.
Ms. Gray,
No.
Ms. Falk,
No.
Ms. Ferreri,
No.
Monsieur Godin,
Non.
Madame Bérubé,
Contre.
Ms. Gazan.
Yes.
Yes pour 6, nays contre 5.
The amendment of Madame Gazan has been carried as amended. The amendment, the clause NDP 4 has been carried as amended. We're still on clause 14.1. Madame Bérubé, do you wish to move an amendment?
Oui.
Do you have?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, so that Bill C-35 be amended by adding after line 28 on page 7 the following new clause, 14.1, Quebec retains sole responsibility for implementing, evaluating and adapting its early learning and childcare policies and programs in Quebec, and therefore the Council's functions do not extend to early learning and childcare or any other related activity in Quebec. It's important to clarify that this amendment would reiterate Quebec's full autonomy in its own areas of jurisdiction. Quebec doesn't want to be assessed by any council or have to report back to Ottawa. This is a provincial area of jurisdiction. Quebec is a trailblazer in this area. The Ministry of Finance in Quebec is calling for this, and I'd ask for unanimous support of this amendment.
My role as chair is to ensure the committee follows the rules and orders that are adopted by the House of Commons. Having said that, Bill C-35 sets out the Government of Canada's vision for a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system. The amendment proposes to allow the Government of Quebec to retain sole responsibility for its early learning and childcare policies and to exclude Quebec from the functions of the National Advisory Council on Early Learning and Childcare created by the bill. As House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, states on page 770, an amendment to a bill that was referred to committee after second reading is out of order if it is beyond the scope and principle of the bill. In the opinion of the chair, as advised to me by the legislative clerk, the amendment is contrary to the bill's stated principle of creating a Canada-wide system, since the Council's functions would not extend to the province of Quebec. Therefore, I rule the amendment inadmissible. My ruling is not debatable, but it can be challenged. Madame Beyroube?
Mr. Chairperson, I would like to indeed challenge your decision.
Madame Beyroube, the ruling of the chair has been challenged. Then I have to put it to the committee. What is the committee's wish? To uphold the ruling of the chair? Mr. Clerk, call a recorded vote on the ruling that I just referenced.
Madame Sachs.
Oui.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Mr. Coteau.
Support the chair's decision.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Support.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Ms. Gray.
Yes.
Ms. Falk.
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari.
Yes.
Monsieur Godin.
Oui.
Madame Bérubé.
Contre.
Ms. Guzan.
Yes.
Yes pour 10, nays contre 1.
The ruling of the chair has been upheld. We will, my ruling was the inadmissibility of the amendment from Madame Beyroube. We'll now go to vote on the new amendment 14.1. We didn't.
Are we voting on it, Chair? If it's ruled
Just a moment.
inadmissible? Yeah.
Sorry, since 14.1 was a new clause by the amendment that was adopted, 14.1 was adopted when the amendment was adopted as sub-amendment. So there was only one vote, Mr. Coteau and members of the committee. 14.1 was adopted by the committee. Shall clause 15 carry? No amendments have been submitted. Clause 15 carried. Now move to clause 16, and I believe we have amendments. Madame Ferrari, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So the amended clause put forward is by replacing line 31 on page 7 with the following. The Minister and the Minister of Labour must prepare and make public. And then replacing line 35 on page 7 with the following: system and respecting a national labor strategy to recruit and retain a qualified early childhood education workforce. Certainly feel like a broken record here, Mr. Chair, with what we continue to bring to the table and what I've said repeatedly of listening to everybody. The reality is, if there is no consequence for a bad job, if there is no measurement tool for success, how in the world can you ever expect any operation to complete its duty? What is the incentive to do the job? So if the Minister and the Minister of Labour are not preparing and making public these annual statements, how are we supposed to measure the success of the program? Without it will it will never work. And we have to have that data. And if there's been anything I've seen in this place of Parliament in doing studies in committee, is there is a massive lack of data in understanding how things are working. And it really removes the emotional part of a lot of these topics that are extremely emotional, to be honest with you, because when you have the science and you have the data and you have it and you have the reports, that speaks volumes to itself. So I would really urge everyone at this table to think long and hard about what we're saying to everybody, because we are in a bit of a crisis, quite frankly, in this country where there is no accountability, there is no transparency, there is constant ethics violations every day we see in this country. And if there are no consequences, if there are no measurements to have in place, what is the point? What incentive is there for anyone to do anything legal or correct or well? And the bar has just continued to slide in this country to do things and to do a good job and to have the welfare of people, and in this instance, children, our most precious resource in this country, at the forefront of it. So that is my amendment, Mr. Chair.
Before I open the floor to discussion, if the amendment of Ms. Ferrari is adopted, then NDP 5 cannot be moved. Discussion on the amendment of Ms. Ferrari and Madame Sachs.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I would just, we all want good legislation. We all want what's best for our kids when they head off to daycare and have the best possible start. And that is why the agreements that we've put in place with every province and territory in this country have very specific frameworks in terms of workforce and in terms of reporting to the Secretariat and so on and so forth. And I would say, through you, Chair, that naming a Minister of Labour would actually be in conflict with Clause 4 in terms of the designation of minister that's in this legislation. And I would remind colleagues that at the federal level, the Labour Minister can only act jurisdictionally on federally regulated workforces. So the EC workforce is a provincial workforce, and appropriately so through the agreements. And that education is also jurisdictionally under provincial purview and is part of our Constitution. That the EC workforce, I would remind colleagues, is part of the provincially regulated system. That being said, I support that we continue to work with provinces and territories to ensure that there is a strong and capable workforce, that it is respected but also high quality, and that we ensure that those mechanisms through the agreements are in place. But frankly, Chair, the Minister of Labour simply doesn't have jurisdictional power here, and it would be really beyond the scope of the Minister of Labour to engage in such activity with a non-federally regulated workforce, because it's really not within their responsibilities.
Thank you. Before we go on, just to clarify, if CPC 9 currently under discussion is adopted, both NDP 5 and Bloc Québécois 3 cannot be moved because there's a line conflict with both. So we'll return to discussion on the amendment of Madame Ferrari. Ms. Ferrari, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, why are we ducking accountability? I guess that's the first question. And I know we already did that, the last amendment. And it's just, what is the other agenda if we're ducking this? Then make the legislation stronger. I mean, there is no doubt without anybody, you can't dispute what we've heard. There's a massive labor problem. This is going to be, you can't fix the childcare wait list if you don't fix the labor shortage. So either make the legislation stronger, right, and address this issue. Respectfully, we are way past jurisdiction. Like this has already bled into every province and territory. This is done. These are signed. These agreements are already done. And now in every witness we've had that was liberal leaning has said, yeah, well, when it's going to be the provinces and territories' responsibility. So you've set the provinces and territories up to fail without having any accountability and transparency as a federal government to ensure that they're supported for a strong workforce. So you're talking out of both sides of your mouth, because, Mr. Chair, through you, Mr. Chair, sorry. I think it just doesn't make any sense to me that it's like why, again, we're passing this. I think there's an opportunity here to be leaders federally and to help our workforce and to tell these important workers that we have their back, which is one of the Liberals' most famous sayings. So again, I would say then strengthen the legislation, then show that workforce strategy is important to you, and don't just pass the buck to the provinces, because right now, the way this legislation is written, it is set up to fail.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. Madame Falk, on the amendment of Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and through you, the hypocrisy, honestly, is so frustrating here. Hearing through you, Chair, from the Liberals of that's provincial jurisdiction, that's out of jurisdiction. This government does not care about jurisdiction, and we know that with looking at previous legislation, or even just telling the provinces what to do. Example, the carbon tax. You do it the Liberal government's way, or we enforce and make you do it anyway. And so I just need to highlight the fact, Mr. Chair, that the hypocrisy is ridiculous. Using the reasoning that this is out of jurisdiction and this is actually up to the province, it's absolutely ludicrous. And I can't believe the Liberals are using that as an excuse to not support this amendment. Or
Ms. Gray and then Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For this amendment, there's nothing in here about ministerial jurisdiction or provincial jurisdiction. One of the most important parts of this is talking about making public the reporting that will be done. And why would we not want data and reporting to be public? It eventually does become public, but it's a long, convoluted process, because there's a report, and then a member of parliament has to submit for an order paper question, or maybe someone in the media has to request an ATIP and access to information. So reports eventually do make their way in the public realm. It's just it takes a lot more effort and work, and in the meantime, people don't have information in order to make good decisions. So, one of the most important parts of this is to make public the data and reporting that the government will be using in order to make their decisions, and also, presumably these reports will be used for future negotiations with the province, because they'll see what's working, what hasn't worked. So this simply makes that information public, so that parliamentarians, whoever the parliamentarians are of the day, can see that and hold the government to account, whoever the government is of the day, and move forward with better policies. So I can't see why somebody wouldn't want to support this, so that there's an openness and a transparency as to how this childcare program is working across the country, so that better decisions can be made. And that's really what the premise of this is for. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for anybody watching at home, it's blatant. It's blatant that the Liberals are trying to dodge accountability here, and it's just by the rationale provided to this committee. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to provide public documents on this? I just want to read this because I think it's a little timely when we have the largest federal strike in Canadian history outside of the doors here. This was to committee. This testimony was from the Canadian Union of Public Employees. And they said, CUPE encourages the Government of Canada to develop and implement a workforce strategy. This strategy must be informed by frontline workers and childcare advocates. And a workforce strategy must result in concrete actions and deliverables on how to make the early learning and childcare sector a safe, secure, well-qualified, and well-compensated career option. I'm pretty sure that's the federal government's job, and that's what we're asking for. So again, not sure if how many times you can say it in one committee, but it doesn't make any sense.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, we'll call a vote on the amendment CP9 of Ms. Ferrari.
Madame Sachs,
Kant.
Mr. Collins, Mr. Coteau,
Opposed.
Mr. Van Bynen,
Opposed.
Mr. Long. No. Ms. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Fall,
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari,
Yes.
Mr. Godin,
Oui.
Madame Bérubé,
Contre.
Ms. Gazan.
Kant.
Yeas pour 4, 4, nays contre 7, 7.
CPC 9 defeated. We'll now move to NDP 5.
Accountability, and I think my amendment is stronger in terms of forcing accountability on the government. The other thing, just as an aside to one of the reasons I couldn't support and proceeding forward with my amendment is we don't have a workforce strategy in place, which is problematic and something that I've been bringing up, that this isn't going to work without a workforce strategy. Unfortunately, they haven't put one on the table yet. So what I'm proposing for this one is that Bill C-35 in Clause 16 be amended by replacing lines 31 to 35 on page 7 with the following 16.1. At the end of the fiscal year, the minister must prepare a report that contains a summary of information in the minister's possession relating to federal investments made in respect of the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system during the fiscal year. B, an assessment of the progress being made respecting that system, including information on the quality, availability, affordability, accessibility, and inclusiveness of early learning and childcare programs and services. And C, a summary of the advice provided by the Council under paragraph 14A and the work of the Council during the reported period. To the minister must cause the report to be tabled in each House of Parliament at any of the first 15 days on which the House is sitting after the report is completed.
Thank you. Before we begin discussion, I'd remind committee members if NDP 5 is moved by Ms. Gazan, adopted, and Bloc Québécois 3 cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Discussion on NDP 5 as the amendment moved by Ms. Gazan. Ms. Sachs, you want the floor?
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank my colleague from the NDP. She and I have had many conversations about workforce and the need for really getting it up to speed and making sure that childcare, and I know she herself was an ECE for many years, and that the level of respect for the high-quality training and long hours and strong commitment to our children really needs to be reflected, and that's something that I continually hope to do in our working tables with the provinces and the grids. I know that's not the perfect answer, but it's one that's true to the agreements that we have today. And I appreciate her efforts in strengthening this. I'd like to make a small sub-amendment, if I can, in paragraphs A and B, where in A it would be a summary of the information in the minister's possession and within the minister's authority to disclose relating to federal investments made in respect of the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system during the fiscal year. And in B, a summary of the progress being made respecting on that system, including information relating to the quality, affordability, and inclusiveness of early learning and childcare programs and services, and to the access to those programs and services. And I'll highlight why these slight changes. We want to make sure there are agreements in place. There is information that is being shared, some of it fiscal, that it's not always within the authority of the minister to be able to as per the agreements, to disclose at certain times when it's under review, and we want to make sure that we respect the agreements that we have and the communication that we have with the provinces in building out this system, but at the same time making sure that there is an information flow through that can allow for the right improvements that need to be made based on the data that's being provided. So thank you, Chair.
We have a sub-amendment that's been moved.
I believe that's been submitted to the clerk.
It's in order.
And, Chair, I'd just like to add, in terms of the other aspects of Ms. Kazan's amendments, we are supportive. It's just A and B.
We have a sub-amendment moved by Ms. Sachs. I've been advised it is in order, so I will just check before we get to debate so that all members have it.
It's been sent.
So it's been sent to your P9, so all committee members have a copy of the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. I'll go to Ms. Gazan and then Ms. Gray on the sub-amendment. Sorry, just a moment. Are you you're asking for a suspend? Okay. Before we debate, that's fine. We'll suspend for 2 moments then. Thank you, Ms. Gray, Ms. Gazan. Suspend for 2 minutes. He's good to go, but are we?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, yes, okay. I'm going to Ms. Sachs, and then I'll come back. Did you have your hand up then, Ms. Gray? You on point of order then, yeah. Yeah, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, point of order, that this sub-amendment, I believe, goes against the intent of the bill, because it, in fact, is removing two of the core principles of the bill, which is quality, availability, affordability, accessibility, and inclusiveness, and it's removing availability and accessibility. So I believe the sub-amendment is out of scope, and it should be deemed inadmissible.
I'll spend for a moment while I consult with the clerk, the legislative clerk. The amendment that only impacts the content of the annual report, not the bill. It does not impact the bill or its reporting processes. So the amendment of Ms. Sachs, the sub-amendment, is in order and debatable. So we'll go to Ms. Sachs, who had her hand up, on your amendment.
Thank you, Chair.
Which is in order and debatable.
Thank you, Chair. And there's been some discussion, and as Mr. Godin knows, and Ms. Gazan knows, and also Madame Berube, it is always my fervent effort to make sure that we find more common ground rather than disagreement here. And I'm not sure procedurally how we do it, but perhaps we can do it on unanimous consent. I'd like to suggest that we put back in Section B, it should read quality, availability, affordability, and accessibility, so that everyone, those values and principles are part of that paragraph. And if we could do it by UC, that would be great, so that we can move on the work of the day.
Yes. Before I go to Ms. Ferrari, so are you asking to withdraw parts from your?
I'm asking to push back in availability and accessibility.
Put back in, when, how was it removed?
In the sub-amendment that we proposed, the words availability and accessibility.
But we have not adopted the sub-amendment yet, no. So you want to withdraw phrasing from your sub-amendment?
No, we're not withdrawing. We're
Sorry,
not
we have-
withdrawing the sub-amendment. We are asking to, if there is UC here, to put in availability and accessibility.
You're adding to your sub-amendment?
Adding to the
Okay, fine,
sub-amendment.
clarify. Okay, I got it.
But I'm asking if we can do it as a friendly update and as a UC rather than than
So
belaboring
you're
what is
asking for
clearly an important issue for
unanimous
all of us at
consent
this table.
to add phrasing to your sub-amendment?
Adding the words availability and accessibility.
Do- Okay, can you, then we'd need to, before we could get that, I would like to see that in writing so that, sure, we'll suspend. Committee will resume. The clerk has received the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. All committee members should have it. So then we'll return to discussion on the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. Ms. Sachs, just a moment. So where we're at, Ms. Sachs had moved a sub-amendment, and she had requested unanimous consent to add additional verbiage, which you now have. Does Ms. Sachs have unanimous consent to add the phrasing, which you now have, to her sub-amendment? Have a question?
Mr. Chair, maybe can I ask a question, even though that we've been asked for unanimous? So just for clarification, so is the point A changes that were sent earlier, are those still applicable?
I'm getting it.
So just because what was sent to us was wasn't the entirety of the newly revised sub-amendment. It was just B. So I just wanted to clarify that that A is still holds. Okay. Yeah.
For allowing for the time to get it in. It has been heard very clear at this table and many other tables about the terminology of availability and accessibility, and in the efforts of working together, it's presented as such.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Ms. Falk.
I could not hear Ms. Sachs at all. I'm wondering if she could speak louder or if the volume could be turned up.
I think her mic was off, so she was responding, Ms. Falk, to a question from Ms. Gray, but I'll ask her to rephrase her answer that she provided. Ms. Gray, are you hearing me now, Ms. Falk? Okay. Go ahead. Then we'll go to Ms. Ferrari. But this is a request for unanimous consent, so I'll leave a limited discussion on it. Ms. Sachs, if you could clarify for Ms. Falk what you just clarified.
I will be brief in time to answer Ms. Gray. This is a request for unanimous consent only on B, to ensure that availability and accessibility are incorporated as part of the language, as per what's been heard at this table. Thank you.
Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the question is obviously the 5 pillars in this bill are quality, availability, affordability, accessibility, and inclusiveness. And Liberals put forth a sub-amendment that cut out 2 of those, availability and accessibility. They were caught by the Conservatives. Now they've put them back forth. My question is, why were they not there to begin with? And to my colleague's point, she said, we consulted, but you never came to us. You said you consulted with the NDP and the Bloc, but you never even came over to the Conservatives. So I'm curious on that comment as well, that you want to work with everyone, but there was no consultation over here. And then my other question is, why were they not in there to begin with?
Before we go, there was a request for unanimous consent. Do we have unanimous consent to debate the
Chair,
addition?
Sorry, my hand's up. I just have
Okay.
I think there's a typo in this. I think it should say a summary, not an summary.
Correct, Ms. Falk. It depends on, well, really is the English manifest does not change the substance, but it is a typo. I'll ask the clerk to recognize that. Thank you, Ms. Falk. I need to see if the committee gives unanimous consent to Ms. Sachs to add the verbiage before we continue discussion on it. We cannot discuss it until it's unanimously agreed by the committee to adopt it. Do I see? I see unanimous consent. So now we will go to the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. And the sub-amendment includes the verbiage that was just circulated. Ms. Falk, you still have your hand up, or is it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just wondering, since there has been changes now, can the clerk please send out the revised, what the updated sub-amendment is with all parts? As Ms. Gray pointed out, we didn't have letter A sent out, just so that we know exactly what it is we are discussing at this point. Thank you.
To do that, we'll have to suspend for a couple of minutes. Suspend. Committee is resuming from suspension. I believe the document requested by Ms. Falk has been circulated, but given that it's 10:45, I will adjourn the meeting, and we first order of business next meeting will be resumption of the clause by clause discussion. Committee adjourned.